Hi, everyone. I'm Nicholas Mendez, and I will be your host for today's session of DevFest Caribbean 2021. We got a lot of interesting talks today and going into the weekend. As you may know, this is what we call our weekend track. So we will have speakers coming to you live, a little bit more interaction and engagement. Please feel free to give your questions and comments in the comment section below. So let's take a look into what we have today. First off, we'll be starting up with a spotlight interview with entitled A Day in the Life of a Data Scientist with Dr. Gillian Augustine. Then yours truly will be giving a presentation on the developments in web dev. After follow that, we will have Sumia, who will be giving a really animated and fun presentation on animation with Flutter and Reeve. And bringing us off at the end of the day, we'll have dependency injection with Hilt brought to you by Santiago Carrillo. So without further ado, I think we'll go right into our first section. So the speaker I'm going to, we're happy to have Gillian with us today. She is a data scientist and a question answer. She received her PhD in microbiology from the University of Vienna, Austria, and a BSc from the University of Leeds, UK, during which she also studied at McGill University, Montreal, in Canada. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the DevFest, Dr. Gillian Augustine. Hi, Dr. Jill, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am going great so far. So maybe you can give us, I gave a little intro, but maybe you can give a wider background for the audience about yourself.
Yeah, so you gave a bit of my academic history, I suppose. I'm from the UK. This is where my accent comes from. I'm living in Vienna in Austria, and I'm also from Grenada. So from Carriacou, Grenada, to be specific. Yeah, my background academically is in molecular biology. So at school and things, I was always studying biology and chemistry. But I kind of realized that I like answering questions, and therefore it was quite nice for me to move into data science, where I can answer lots of questions on lots of different topics using data. So after my PhD, I worked in a traditional telecommunications role. So I worked for Austria's largest telecommunications company called A1. And then I worked for a big paper and packaging manufacturer called Mondi. And now I'm working as a senior data scientist at Crayon in the Artificial Intelligence Center of Excellence in Europe.
Excellent, excellent. Wow, that was such a journey. So we're always happy to have people from the Caribbean diaspora and, of course, international speakers as well. So you mentioned you worked at a company called Crayon. Can you give us some more information about that company?
Yeah, so it's a company. It's around 10 years old now, headquartered in Norway, and initially they started in traditional IT and in licensing of software, but in the past few years they've developed and are still developing various centers of excellence for AI across the world. So in North America, in Europe, and also in Asia as well. And as a data scientist at Crayon, I work with customers of Crayon, which typically big companies, small companies, medium companies, wanting to transform their processes digitally. So to make use of the data that they have in their processes. And I typically develop and apply machine learning algorithms for these customers to help improve their processes. And this is pretty much the main focus right now.
Great, great. So that's interesting. We also have companies down here that does something similar. So it's cool to see that it's a common thing that companies, the term digital transformation, but in a sense, can you call this like AI transformation, where you come in and you consult with them?
Yeah, it kind of is. So the services that we offer at Crayon, there's actually a range of services because companies typically have different levels of digital maturity. So to do AI, to do proper AI, you need a lot of data and a lot of data and a lot of good quality data. But that is not often the case. So what we do, we actually also guide companies from the beginning to kind of advise them on how to shape the data that they might need to collect. And then once they've collected that data, we can start getting data insights from it, developing machine learning and AI solutions, and then implementing those. So we do kind of the whole range. So you don't have to be a super advanced company to come to us, but we definitely find a way to help.
Okay, so that's really awesome because a lot of places or a lot of people really undermine how important that data quality aspect. I remember I heard data scientists spend somewhat of what 60, 70% of the time just cleaning data. Is that true?
Yeah, if not more, I would say closer to 80% of the time. Even though we would definitely love to spend less time cleaning and more time modeling. Um, but yeah, data is, if data is not collected with data scientists like guiding that process, sometimes you can think that the data is actually very good quality, but then it's not what exactly we need. Or maybe it is good quality, but one key thing is missing. Um, so we do spend a lot of time cleaning data. But the closer a relationship we have with like a customer or a company when they're collecting this data, then we can really keep this time to a minimum, and then we can really dedicate our time to where our expertise is, which is in machine learning.
Awesome. So I guess maybe the kind of problems you'll typically see is like optimization problems, or can you just give some insight to what the common kind of common problem areas that you'll provide an impact?
Yeah, we have so in our actual team where I work now, we have three different data science focus groups and one data engineering and software development focus group. One data science group is natural language processing focused. So this is a lot of text analysis and understanding what's going on behind the text. Examples of this could be, for example, with in the service industry, when if you like email a service desk and you have a question, how can we make sure that this email gets sent to the right person? So that's one example. We also have a computer vision department as well. They focus on really interesting use cases. A common theme is quality control in manufacturing. So, for example, you need to do visual inspections of materials. Sometimes it's possible for humans to do these. Sometimes we're actually looking at microscopic things which human eyes cannot see. So this is really where machines help us to identify issues in physical products. And then the third team, which I'm part of, is focused more generally on data insights. So this is specializes in structured data. So whereas NLP is more text and computer vision is images, we work on the typical things that you would expect in an Excel spreadsheet, just on a really, really large scale.
Wow, wow.
So we do use cases like sales forecasting is a typical one. Also predictive maintenance, identifying using sensors on machinery when parts of machinery are going to fail. These are two typical examples that we do.
This is so much interesting. So I see a really wide width of problems that you'll tackle in your day to day. I know I was really curious. I remember a time I've been to an academic conference and I was surprised to learn that people are there just because it's their job. So I wonder if that's something that you all engage in as well. Do you all send employees to conferences or do you all publish and whatnot?
So we definitely do get actively involved in conferences. And one thing I like about our team is that most people have very close ties to academia. So I have a PhD, but I would say most people in our team have a PhD rather than not. It's not a requirement to join the team at all, but it just kind of shows that we do have an appreciation for academic research, and we are always staying up to date with what are the latest tools out there, what are the latest discoveries. So this is how we stay connected, and also through local connections with local universities and institutes as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So then, given your experience of academia and industry, I wonder if you can speak more about, how was it different when you were doing your ML and AI data science in the academic context? What were some things that were novel experiences you would have encountered when you were doing it in the industrial context?
It's quite interesting for me because my basis of my PhD was not focused on AI. It was focused on data, but not on AI and machine learning. But academically, academia is kind of similar. Each field in academia is similar to each other. And when I was in academia, I learned a few key things, which I'm really grateful for now, which is like documenting everything. Because when you do a PhD, you're working on a research project for 4 to 5 years. So you really need to be able to go back in time and check that out. And also learning to explain things, to like complicated things to wider audiences. And I would say when looking, so obviously I left academia after my PhD, and that was an active choice, and I'm very happy I made it. And I would say the main difference, I think, is that in academia, at least in molecular biology, because it's related to healthcare, it's extremely competitive to the point that it's not actually productive to be that competitive. Because you can have like many research groups trying to work out the answer to the same question. And rather than working together, they work separately. Whereas I think in industry, it's way more common that you kind of accept that there are other similar groups out there, and they do similar work to you when you work with them. You use their tools, you build on their tools, they build on your tools. So there's a much more collaborative effect, I would say. And then another difference, which I'm not saying it's a good or a bad one, but different personalities like different things, is that in academia, you really focus on one specific topic or very small range of topics, and you really want to be very good and the best at that thing. But when doing data science in the like outside of academia, there are way more things which impact how things go and what focus you should do and how well the models that you develop should perform. So some people really like the focus academically. Other people like being able to apply those models to like real life contexts and real life situations. So those are two differences.
Great, great. Thank you for that interesting perspective. It seems somewhat counterintuitive because you think, you're in business, you need to be competitive, yet there's a spirit of collaboration. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because if you don't, then it's really, you end up winning big or you end up getting nothing. And I think generally, even though you try to hire the best people, you know that there are other teams out there doing good stuff too. So why not take inspiration from them, and why not use the tools that they develop? Sometimes what you see is that similar things will be developed, but one thing might have a slightly different focus from the other one. And I know, like in our day-to-day life as a data scientist at Crayon, we use cloud tools primarily. or almost completely. And for example, we don't have preference between Microsoft Azure and Amazon Web Services. We just go with whatever the customer wants, because if you have this flexibility and you're open to accept new tools, then you can really do the best. And I think that's kind of what you see in business. It was surprising when I joined, I suppose. You do think that business is super, super competitive, but it's almost like every business has their core focus or their core competencies, and they heavily rely on others also to help them.
Oh, that's awesome. That's good to hear. So you're one of our speakers from the Women in Tech Caribbean community, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's great. So can you give us a bit of a background of, your involvement and history with that community?
So I'm quite new to that community, actually, but I would say it's been really warm and welcoming. I've taken part in some of the monthly get-togethers. It's a very international group of people, so all with roots in the Caribbean, but they're spread all over the world. And I really like that group. I chose actively to be part of that group because when I was going through my PhD and then afterwards, I was not seeing anyone who looked like me or who had my background, and I kind of had to think to myself, as I get further in my career, how can I support the community? Or like, how do I want to give back? And for me, it's really keeping in contact with the Caribbean community and helping people and answering questions and really supporting people. So I'm really grateful for this group of women. It's a really talented group, and yeah, it's fun.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you for giving back, because I mean, there is a DevFest UK, but you are here, so we're so happy for you to be here and joining us. So I think we're just about to the end of this session. So I would just like open the floor if you have any guidance or tips for anyone looking to get into AI. They may be starting off in the Caribbean. Yeah, what tips you might have for them?
One thing I love about the AI community and machine learning community and data analytics and data science is so much stuff is open source, which means that a lot of it is free. You can just get started. If you have a computer and you have a somewhat good internet connection, you can already get started. And the internet really allows you to connect with people. So for example, I got into Women in Tech Caribbean through the organizer who I followed on Twitter. I think that was the direction it went. So like using social media, connecting with people, getting advice from people, it's really good. And yeah, it's really great that it's pretty much free. If you have a computer, you can build apps, you can develop algorithms, you can build user interfaces. So there's a really low barrier to entry in that sense. And as I said, I'm happy if anyone wants to reach out with any questions, advice about job interviews or anything, debugging code. My specialties are Python and R. Yeah, and there's always help out there. If you reach out to it, then people will help you, and you can get where you want to be.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I would like to welcome you to the DevFest, of course, and thank you for being part of DevFest today and giving this wonderful talk. I'm sure it has been insightful for viewers, those who are watching it live, who may be coming back in the recording. So thanks again, Dr. Jill.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. See ya. Oh, I guess now I could play that animation. Right, so now for our next presentation, it will be me, I guess. coming to you live. So my presentation, let me share my screen. Give me a moment. Let's see how we can do this. Share screen. Right, let's get that up. Right, so my presentation is simply entitled Developments in Web Development. So, I'm Nicholas Mendez. I'm a web developer and a web instructor at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. Web has been my passion, and building apps is something I'm very crazy about. So, it makes sense for me to give, a web-inspired talk. So this is a brief outline what we're going to talk about today. And first, I'm going to start off a history of the web experiences. So I always like to give context for those who maybe, are new to the web, not very technical and whatnot. So the way the web started, it was simply a means to transfer documents to an application called a web browser. So you have a web browser that's going to receive the documents that you request from its file system based on the URL that you provide to the web browser, okay? And you can kind of see all of these things coming into play here, right? So what happens is this example of a web server connecting to a web server. You can see all of the files inside of it. Here you see the path, my folder, and one thing you could see right away is that the file system of the server, it's just like any file system in a computer, maps directly to the path and URL that you use to retrieve it. So there's a page called My Page, and if you actually browse to the folder in the web browser, you're gonna get that page. This is what the first World Wide Web site looked like. I forgot the year, but you could see in my blog articles where I kind of cited this. It was very simple. They were just interested of having these documents that were linked to each other via hyperlinks. Okay. And then came web, what we call Web 2.0. It's an evolution of the web where the industry decided, there are much more things we can do than just documents. Let me just do a comedy corner there. And that was the birth of what we call the dynamic web applications. So they can do things like connect to the database, they give you a login experience, they render what we call dynamic data. So what allows you to do is, without having to rewrite and redeploy the website, you can change the content of what the user sees. And then the main mechanism behind that was what we call server-side scripting. So instead of just connecting to the web server and retrieving a document, you can just actually execute programs that will then return a response that otherwise would look like these documents. So that's what these server-side scripts will do for you. And then we have some newer techniques called AJAX and single-page applications. I'm not going to go into much details into what that is. It is basically evolution from the capabilities of a programming language called JavaScript that runs in the browser that allows you to do more interactive things and give a more app-like feels. So you'll see this word called the single-page app, whereby instead of navigating between multiple pages, JavaScript is going to handle all the navigation, is going to change the views and loading the data. So this is one of the earliest server-side scripted apps, and you just see at the side here, if you have any programming experience, you would see some script that was needed see some JavaScript at the side here. But in server-side scripting, you're writing code that would run on the server before the response is sent to the browser. What that means is that the work is really lightweight when it comes to the browser side, because usually all the work is more or less done. So you see this term called server-side rendering, where the UI work and building up the buttons and whatnot is mainly dedicated to the server. As an example of a server-side app, any WordPress blog would fall in that category, as long as it's not something fancy like a Jamstack and a headless WordPress. Right? What happens is every page or every navigation you do is going to load a new page, which will be provided to you from the server. Then you have your single page apps, and one of the earliest examples of that is Gmail. Everyone should be familiar. All your UI is mainly rendered on the browser. So this is JavaScript really taking in control and handling all of your UI interactions. Right? They give you very app-like experiences, and they do not require reloads. It's JavaScript intensive, as JavaScript is controlling all of this, and there's a need to re-implement some basic browser behaviors. So the experience of the browser was mainly meant for documents, but now we have this paradigm shift where we want to have more dynamic behaviors, and sometimes that means overriding some of the native interactions that the browser will provide. So if you had something, a really nice example of this is when you're navigating between pages of a browser, and when you go back, you use the history, and it changes the URL, and it actually knows things like where you have scrolled on the page. All of that is broken to an extent. When you do a SPA app, you kind of need to re-implement all of those behaviors. If you want to get more context and learn more about rendering and web apps, I have a Dev2 blog series that I talk about this, and you can check it out here. There's the URL there, but if you missed the URL, don't worry, I will provide yet another URL to this entire slide deck. So any question is, we went through Web 1, and we're currently in Web 2. So what does Web 3 look like? What's the next evolution? There's a question on the minds of many. And there are many approaches, so different approaches and visions and what this may be, and we're going to cover some of them. So first, as always, you can always expect the innovation from the frameworks, the communities that are really pushing forward the development or the future of what web experiences are. So we're going to go into them. There's this new term that was sort of coined by Rich Harris, one of the developers behind Svelte, called transitional apps. So we see the gains or the advantages of server-side apps and the drawbacks, and the advantages of client-side apps and the drawbacks. Transitional apps is an attempt to kind of strike a balance between the two. It's a hybrid between server-side rendering and client-side rendering, and it lets you load some of your components on the server instead of the client. Some of these toolings actually allow you to perform what we call a static build. And I don't want to get too much technical, but it basically means is going to crawl all the data and basically generate all of the possible HTML pages you may need, so you can statically deploy your website as a set of files. So it's interesting how we're going back and forth between static and dynamic. First, there were static documents, and then we had less documents and heavy JavaScript, and now we are bringing them together to build back static documents. Very fun. So the frameworks that are working on this React via a new feature called Server Components. Another framework called Marco that performs something called partial hydration. Quick does lazy loading components. Astro has this architecture called the Islands architecture, and Svelte has Svelte Kit, which is supposed to be your one-stop shop for building transitional applications. So there's a link to the talk. It goes much more in depth on this and is very interesting. So the next approach would be from the web platform itself. So when we talk about the web platform, we're really talking about the standards, the web standards. So we have all of these web browsers that need to provide something called a browsing experience, but it needs to be a combined consensus on what a web browser is. So that's what the standards are for. They standardize the concept of a browser, and we have different organizations and communities that contribute to evolving what this standard is. It's called the Living Web Standard. So, which is really cool with that is it's open, and it allows individuals or organizations to propose what the next feature of the web would be. And one feature that really blew me away, and it was presented in, I believe, Chrome Dev Summit 2019 from the Google team, is called the Web Portals API. So the Portals API aims to help with transitions on building app-like experiences between websites. So this is a really cool one. Here you have 4 websites transitioning between each other, and they give a really consistent look and feel. So yeah, they really help streamline this experience. And here's a quote from that blog, and I also linked that blog post as well. Single page apps offer a nice transition, but they come to the cost of higher complexity to build. Multi-page applications are much easier to build, but you end up with blank screens between pages. So they're really trying to tackle that behavior of transitioning between experiences. Now, in a more modern proposal, we have the shared element transition APIs. So this one works on a more smaller scope. It works within a web application. And here's one. I'm just going to read off the quotes. Although on the web, we don't tend to get those kind of effects. Effects meaning being able to transition, as in mobile applications. Creating a transition from one page to another after clicking a link is sort of impossible, but isn't exactly easy when you're doing it in a single page app. So these are kind of the features that SPAs are trying to provide. But as I said, it's a lot of JavaScript that you need to load to try to provide that feature. So the platforms like Android and iOS have tools to make this stuff easy. So why not the web platform as well? That's what the shared element transitions API is about. It's a proposal that provides high-level way to transition between page states. So there's the link to the blog post, and they actually have a demo of an application written in Preact that actually demos this kind of transitioning between and routing between pages, all natively in the browser. So let's look at another effort in terms of looking forward at the future of the web. And we have this concept of the decentralized web. So what's going to be Web 3.0? We're currently in Web 2.0, and the big question is, what's next? So we're hearing many talks about having it decentralized, and what do we mean when we say decentralized? Usually when you have a web application, your code, or at least the simplest implementation, is on one server, and you have multiple clients that need to make a connection to that server, right? So it's centralized in that case. A decentralized web is whereby you can connect to multiple different nodes to get that particular service, right? So one possible network for that could be blockchain, and we're seeing a lot of discussions and usage and frameworks and tooling that are coming about to having you to deploy applications on the blockchain. Another approach could be on edge computing, and this one is really interesting, and it's decentralizing your backend. So we're accustomed to deploying our backend server applications on the server, but through services like Cloudflare Workers, Vercel Edge Functions, and Dino Deploy, what you're actually doing is deploying what we call cloud functions on the edge. And when we say edge, we typically mean like the CDNs, the content delivery networks that we traditionally use for just distributing static assets. So this is a really interesting paradigm shift in terms of building backend applications, and it might very well be some way the future on how we build them. Because for one thing, it definitely makes applications cheaper to host and faster, because that's what the highly distributed edge is all about. So that more or less brings me the end of this presentation. Really short and sweet. And of course, there's the link to the slide deck. Y'all could check it out. You could find me on Dev2. I have many other articles there. So I'm just going to move this off. That's the end of that presentation. And let me just do that fancy transition again. Great. So Now we're going on to our next talk here, which is from Soumya. She couldn't be with us live, unfortunately. She probably has a class going on now. But luckily, we do have two recordings, one of a presentation and of a Q&A. So I'm just going to share screen here. Give me a... Just give me a little moment. Okay. All right. So now we got Soumya with animation with Reeve and Flutter.
I'm super, super excited to take you on this short journey of design and engineering. So the link between design, animation, and human interaction is stronger than ever. I mean, a huge component of mobile interactions and web interfaces are cell animations that really make up the overall experience. In this hands-on workshop, you will learn how to create a simple animation in Rive, import it to Flutter, and interact with it. So join me as we bring our animation to life. So you may be wondering, what exactly is Rive? And well, let me start by saying that their website is definitely something worth seeing. It's so pretty. Some of you have been present when it was called Flare, but Rive is essentially a design tool that allows us to generate beautiful, beautiful, beautiful animations like a pro. And Rive animations are platform independent, which means you can create once and use it anywhere. So it is really, really, really simple to use. And I'm really excited to show you how we can create a basic animation today. So you may be wondering, what exactly are we going to do today? So in recent times, my friends and I have been obsessed with using stickers on WhatsApp. I mean, they're hilarious sometimes. So I wanted to create a simple animation inspired by one of these stickers. Disclaimer, in no way, shape, or form am I an artist. So we're going to be making our own botched version of this sticker. Yes, so now we're on the Rive website and we're going to create a new artboard basically. So we're going to go in the bottom right corner and press launch. And what we're going to do is, in my case, I've decided in resemblance to our sticker guy, we kind of want it to be more rectangular. So I'm just going to reduce the height slightly to 300. It's totally up to you. Okay. Yes, so what we see here is an artboard, okay? And this is where your graphics live, and you can add as many graphics as you like on this specific artboard. On the left side, you see the hierarchy, which all the components that will be on the artboard will live. On the right side, you have your inspector. So all the components that you create, you can change the position, color, effects, and much, much more. And up here we have our tools. So we have some shapes, our freehand pen, bones, which I'll explain in a bit. And actually, if you used Figma before, this may be a bit familiar to you, like the actual setup. Hey everyone, first things first, we are at our artboard. And this is, once again, as I mentioned, this is where all the excitement is going to happen. You can do a lot of stuff on this artboard. For example, you can change the background color by clicking the actual component. You can see that there were a lot of properties that were revealed to us per se. And we can change the color by changing the fill. So usually you could do white if you're having like a white background per se. But in my case, I'm just going to change the transparency to 0 just because it's a lot better in terms of if you have any components or widgets in your background, then it's not going to interfere with that. So our artboard is actually transparent now. So now we can begin. So what I'm going to do now is just start with some shapes to get the head. We're going to do a circle for the head. Once again, this is just to show you all exactly the basics of just animating in general. It's great to also label your components as well, so you kind of know exactly what's going on and you're staying organized, because that's really important. And I'm going to add another shape for the body, a polygon. We're going to improvise here, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to do a polygon for the body, and yeah, we're going to rotate it so that it can match the head. I know it looks nothing like our sticker, but the concept is there. Take that a bit. And we're going to rename it to body. And now we're going to just add some eyes. So we're going to zoom in, add some eyes just to make it an actual being. And what we can do, we can also label it left eye, right eye, and then you can just copy and paste components as you wish. And now we're going to use our pen tool just to kind of show you how it works. And we're going to create a nice mouth, well, a smiley face per se. We're going to rotate that a bit. You can rotate it manually or just by adding numbers, for example. And then we're going to fill it in, make the mouth or the smile a nice pink color. We're going to add some skin tone. We're going to make it look like me a bit. So a nice brown color per se. Yeah. And as you can see that we have our polygon, our body is like on top of the face, and that's because of the hierarchical structure. If we just move the body below the head, it went underneath. So this is also something really important to know when it comes to designing and stuff. And once again, if you're used to Figma and other prototyping tools, this is probably quite familiar to you. What we're gonna do now is add a little sweater vest. I mean, let's put on some clothes on our good friend here. Now we're gonna add some arms on our lovely character here. And once again, we're improvising. So the arms are just gonna be just simple triangles, go figure. You can rotate it manually as mentioned. Or once again, you can always rotate it by changing the actual value of the rotation. So something cool I want to talk to you guys about are actually bones. So in our case, I really won't be able to show you the beauty of bones because it's such a simple animation. But if you have something that has very fluid movement, bones is like a really, really excellent tool that you can use to parts of your actual design. So as you can see, just by moving the root bone, the actual arm doesn't really change, which is weird because usually when your bones move, your arms move too, right? And that's because we have to move the arm inside the bone, if that makes sense. Once again, hierarchical structure. So what I'm going to do now is move the left arm underneath the left bone, okay? And the left root bone. And then what you're going to see is once I move the bone, the arm is going to change as well. Simple, just like that. Really good. Actually group all of our elements together. And this is very, very useful because in our animation, we are going to kind of move our entire character to like one side, right? We're kind of moving it. So instead of just selecting each element and moving those things, we can just select the entire group of elements and just move them around like that. Super simple, especially for when it comes to just simple movements like jumping up and down, moving left and right, etc. What we're going to do is create our first point. We're going to click our element that we are evaluating. And yes, so we've just created our first point. Okay, this is the starting point of our animation. And you can see that by the dot. And we're going to move a little bit more in our timeline. And because of that, we're also going to move our character to match the actual movement. So we're just going to drag it a bit to the right. As you can see in the top right corner, you see the blue diamond is already filled out for the X position. And that's because that's the only thing that has changed for our character from the previous state. So it's smart in that it recognizes what changed. So there are three things that I'm going to be moving or changing in the animation. Okay, I'm going to be moving the entire body, right? So the entire animation, just left and right. And I'm also going to change the arm positions of my character because I want it to be happy and just moving all around. So I want to create the initial state for the body, left arm, and right arm, okay? And as I move my character, if you change the arms, they kind of show you what changed, and that will be your new state. So if we just play it, you can see that we've actually just created a simple animation from one state to the other. So we're just going to move it again, and we're going to keep on repeating the process, moving the body, moving the arms, etc., until we have a full animation. So afterwards, you can see that it's creating a very full animation, which looks really good. What you could do right now is that it only plays once, but if you would like a continuous loop, you can just change it. From here, we have something called a loop. We also have like ping pong, and we can just copy, and it looks a bit funny. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the initial states to the end state as well, so that it repeats a lot more smooth in its transition. So I'm just going to do that. And now it should look a lot better. And yes, it does. Excellent. Looks much better. So once you're happy with it, you can, you can also see like ping pong. So you see the difference between loop and ping pong. So loop goes from the beginning to the end, beginning to the end. Whereas ping pong, it goes from beginning to the end and end to the beginning, beginning to the end, end to the beginning. So just like that. So depending on what you're looking for, you could create a simple animation like that. So once you're happy with your animation, you can actually export it and you download it. And this is your animation now. And the cool thing about animations on Rive is that you can use it anywhere. So not only on your Flutter app, but other places as well. So I'm going to see you all at the code base, and we're going to add this animation to our little app. And I've created a very simple Flutter application. As you can see, it's a simple to-do list that well, it doesn't really do anything now. You can check off what's been done on your to-do list, and that's basically it. So what I kind of wanted to do was add the animation at the end after I've completed all of my tasks on my to-do list as a little, celebratory kind of gesture. And I kind of want to show you the steps that you must take in order to get your animation onto your Flutter app. So the first thing you want to do is you want to import it. So we're going to go to our pubspec.yaml file, and we are going to import our Rive package. Okay, so I'm going to go here. So this is the latest version from their documentation, so I suggest using this. And one thing also that we must do is our animation is considered an asset, right, in our Flutter application. So I'm going to add that as an asset so that we can be able to use it basically. And you want to point to the asset, don't forget. So we've done those two steps, and now it's, I guess, the implementation time, which is, believe me, it's super easy to implement a animation from Rive to Flutter. So now we're going to go to our main code. Once again, super simple to-do list going on. I'm going to import up here the package from Rive. So this is how it looks. There you go. Excellent. And now it's just calling our animation really. So I'm going to go down here, and I am going to just create a simple expanded widget. So basically I want to just check, if the length is 0, then here's the important part. I'm going to call, Rive animation dot asset. And then here we're going to put our path, okay, to where your asset is located. And for me, it's located in library asset and then the file. So that's that. And afterwards, I am going to, what if the length of the list is not 0? I'm just going to return an empty, just a container with basic height, nothing fancy. Okay, excellent. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run my code, and I'm going to show you exactly what's there. We're going to do a little quick test run, and we're going to see if our animation actually works. So I am going to click, and voila, here we see our lovely little animation running side to side in joy because we are free for the rest of the day. So that is very much how to implement a Rive animation in Flutter. Super simple. But to take it a step further, you can also interact with your animation. You can wrap a gesture detector around it and do so much more with it as well. All right, folks, that's it for this session. Thank you all for coming to animate with Rive and Flutter. I hope you've learned a thing or two in the process of adding an animation to your Flutter application. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing some really, really cool animations in future Flutter applications. Super simple, and it really does add a lot of sparkle to your application. You can find me on social media. Would love to connect with you all, and also interested in hearing your honest feedback on this presentation. So connect with me on Instagram, LinkedIn, or wherever it may be. So hope to see you on the web.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So now to get into the Q&A. With Sumia. Let's line that up. Great. Thank you so much for that talk, Soumya. So maybe we can start with the Q&A right away. But first, before we get to that, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
I am from the beautiful islands of the Bahamas, and about 6 years ago, I moved to Europe to start this new journey into tech, basically. So currently, I'm a software engineer at Nike, and I work on creating business applications for our internal stakeholders. So not as cool as working on Nike.com or the mobile app, but it helps run the business, and that's super important.
Oh, that's really amazing. I mean, I imagine Nike is a huge corporation. So can you give us a idea of what your work environment is like? Like, are you part of a team? How do you all work?
Yeah. It's funny because coming into Nike in tech, I wasn't really sure how much tech we would be doing, because you always, when you go as a software engineer, you sometimes associate tech with like the Googles, Microsoft, the Apples, not really with, the Nikes and stuff. But I was really surprised in how much tech is being used at Nike. It's such a casual company. As you can imagine with the brand, it's perfect for someone like me who's a young millennial and is looking for a casual environment, a work environment to just be myself and to do what I love. So we do work in teams, depending on whatever project you're working on. And yeah, it's just a fun place to be. And it's a great place to just express yourself and work on what you really want to work on that actually has impact value. And it's also fun and really personal for me when I see other people using something that I worked on, whether it's in the shop or, anywhere else. So that's a real huge value factor for me.
Awesome. That's so cool to hear. Nike has devs and they just let you do it your own way. So in your talk, you talked about Flutter and you combine this with this platform called Reeve. Can you talk a bit about Reeve?
Yeah, so Rive is a design animation tool, which is so amazing because when you think of, I don't know, heavy animation or stuff, you think of, I don't know, some fancy softwares and all of that. But you can make such simple animations in a very easy interface. So Rive is used to create graphics, animations, whatever you may name it. And this is cool because you can use what you created on different stuff. So not only on your mobile apps and websites, but you can just keep it for yourself, put it on a flyer or whatever it is. So it is the design tool. And the fact that it integrates with Flutter makes it such a perfect combination because Flutter has design in mind, right? It has experience and user interaction in mind. And combining that with the coolness of Rive and animations and all those little cute, things that you see from Rive, it really does add on to the entire experience that you get from creating an application with Flutter.
Right. Yes, I totally agree with that this whole idea of enhancing a user experience with motion design. Admittedly, that's something I stray away from because that would have to mean for me in the web playing with a lot of CSS and animation, CSS and keyframes. So it's good that Rive helps you get there. And, so you said that, and I noticed that it's a web platform, so it works entirely in the browser.
Exactly. So granted, you could create your own animations in Flutter, but that is a lot. That is difficult. That's like intense maths and, it takes up a lot of time. But yes, it's so simple with Rive. You can just open up the website, create an account, and everything is stored there. You don't have to download any fancy softwares. You don't need a fancy PC. And tablet, laptop, you can design and create to your heart's desire. So I think that ease really does make it really accessible for people who actually want to get into design and animation without the heavy investment, for example.
That's awesome. So that can also work for if I'm building a web app and I want to do transitions from the different parts of my pages, like menus and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you, I don't know, just to give you an example, if you're if you're sending a nice message to someone and you're pressing the send button, you can add a little animation to your button. You can add animation, literally everything, to your login page, like I said, to buttons, to just your pages in general. Literally whatever you can imagine, it can be done with Rive and Flutter together. So I think that's why it's such a powerful tool, because it really does heighten your imagination to another level.
That's interesting. So if I'm building for the web, keep going a lot of web again because that's
no, it's fine. Actually, Flutter is going for the web soon. Well, it's already at the web.
It's basically there because I know as a Flutter tool, you can now build to the web and they have all these PWA features. So I'm wondering, should Flutter be your way into bringing the Rive animations in, or can you just combine Rive with vanilla JavaScript and HTML?
I think that really depends on your preference. I mean, as you've seen from the video, it was so easy to just integrate it with Flutter. I mean, I just called it in one simple line of code, right? Rive animation.asset, and there my animation was just present. So it does provide lots of benefits with using Rive and Flutter. Now, I don't know how it is with the other frameworks, but I could say that the process was super easy with Rive. Very small learning curve, and you get the results like immediately, right? Especially with the hot reload and all of those features that Flutter also provides.
Yes, I really need to give a shout out to Flutter and the Flutter team. I really believe it's a powerful tool in getting this whole cross-platform, right? Once deploy many places, because I believe so we have web, iOS, Android. What am I missing? Any other platforms?
For now, that's all I can think about. But that itself is really powerful. Just all three, and even the difference between mobile and web is, once again, it's not a huge difference. You can use basically a similar code base, just changing a few things, and bam, you have an application for the web just like that.
Yeah, that's really powerful, and you have this whole cross-platform experience. And a lot of things that we also see that's paired with Flutter is the use of another platform by Google's Firebase. I wonder if you have any experience with Firebase.
I do, and I really love Firebase. I mean, Firebase has their own conference on its own, just because Firebase has so many different tools and use cases alone, right? So I can talk on and on and on and on about Firebase and their use cases. But I really love, for example, just their storage. Just using that integrated with Flutter applications, it's really amazing. Analytics and so many other things, even like user authentication and all those stuff. It's and I can't just stress enough how easy the integration is with Firebase and Flutter. It's just a few lines of code and a few commands in terms of your actions, like what do you want to do with the data, and it works very. It's just an easy process. It's such a pleasant process, to say the least.
Yes, I agree. I know there are all these SDKs there for all those services, and I have used myself Firebase authentication and storage. Storage
Exactly.
is just and the database as well. Just being able to write your code and it's your data is already blasted up there and you're ready to work with it. I think that really helps make that experience of building a whole production ready application. And
exactly.
it's as time as possible. So
yeah.
If I recall correctly, you are part of our speakers. You are one of our speakers that came from the Women in Tech Caribbean community. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Can you speak more about that community and your experience with it?
Yes. So Women in Tech Caribbean is a community for women. So for women and those who identify as women from the Caribbean. So you don't have to be in the Caribbean. You can also be in the diaspora, like I am, kind of. Well, not really. I'm still from the Bahamas, but I live in Europe. But still, it's a great community to connect with people who actually relate to you. and are going through what you're going through. And it's so great to have a community because it almost feels like a sisterhood in terms of we're on similar journeys, and we can always share with each other our struggles, our accomplishments, and it's like I said, it's a sisterhood. So it's an amazing place to connect with others. So you just don't feel alone on this journey. And in fact, I heard about this opportunity from Women in Tech Caribbean as well. So we're always sharing with each other different opportunities for everyone to grow, to do something, to learn something else, etc. And especially for me living in Europe, obviously there's not much people in the Caribbean there. So for me to have a piece of home, even if we meet just once a month virtually, for me to have a piece of home with these ladies, it's such a great everlasting connection that we've made. And it's really important as well to have this kind of community because it is an underrepresented community still, even as the years go by. So to encourage people, like I said, if you're doing this alone, you probably might struggle and may want to give up and quit. But to have a community, it's a lot easier to, push someone and really have them make ends meet.
Yes, that is so excellent. And we really need to give a shout out to Women in Tech Caribbean because
Yes.
I don't think we would reach our diversity goals for this event without them. I think we have
Exactly.
about 5 speakers, and it's so great to see, and really thankful for that community and other communities that could bring underrepresented people in tech together. So
yeah.
You mentioned about the Caribbean diaspora, and that's something that I've becoming more aware of. When we host these regional events, we have people who may not be born in the Caribbean, but they have those Caribbean roots. And we're so surprised to find that they're from all over the world. It's so interesting that the Caribbean is just spread out. I wonder if you have any experience with bouncing up with colleagues or people in the tech industry from the Caribbean diaspora.
Yeah, so moving to the Netherlands. So before I was living in Poland, and I think I was the only person from the Bahamas there. But moving to the Netherlands, it was really good in the sense that there's a huge Surinamese population there. So I fit right in because, with Surinamese, they have the Indian Surinamese and, the Black Surinamese. So I fit right in, and it almost felt like home connecting with them. Granted, are they? I guess you would say they are part of the diaspora. But yeah, just to see Caribbean people in the Netherlands, and we also have just people like myself who've left their home countries for work. So for example, in the Bahamas, like at least growing up in our country, there's a lot of emphasis on tourism, right? So tourism and banking, those are like the 2 career sectors that, are highly encouraged to go into because job stability or whatever. But I think it's really important for me, because I do work with a lot of organizations now, to encourage younger students to explore careers in even in industries outside of those 2. So especially within the tech industry, one that I'm familiar with. So unfortunately, there isn't so much opportunities back home, but finding the opportunities abroad and getting the experience and then bringing it back home serves just as much purpose as well. So I love meeting people who are on similar journeys to me, like in Europe or wherever it may be, because we all could relate in a way, because we're all from the Caribbean. Our countries have similar issues as well. So it's always nice meeting people there and, just sharing events and all of those things. And yeah, it's interesting too, because a lot of them, they spent many years there. So they've also adopted the culture of the country that they live in. And that's like a birth of a new culture now, like culture of 2 cultures combined. So it's just beautiful to see, when people go to different countries and the things that they pick up from each country and all of that stuff. It's just nice meeting people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Just being able to relate with someone in a way you just didn't, you didn't expect. So
Yeah.
I think that brings us about to the end of this Q&A. I would like to welcome you to the DevFest, of course. Usually I would open with that. And thanks for being part.
Thank you for having me. It was so good to be here. Shout out to all of my Flutter developers.
Awesome. Great. Well, that's it for this session, and we'll see you all in the next one. Great. So we will go right into our next talk, and we do have the speaker here in studio. Before I get into that, let me just fix up some things here. Right. So our next speaker is the CEO and founder of addaschool.org, and he also happens to be a Google developer expert. His name is Santiago Carrillo, and we welcome him to the DevFest. Of course, he would not be a stranger to DevFest, being a Google developer expert. Hi, Santiago.
Hi, Nicholas. How are you?
I am doing great. How are you doing?
Great, thank you.
Great. So, I mentioned and I gave a little interview about you, but I wonder if you could just give an introduction, just to introduce yourself to the general audience.
Sure. So my name is Santiago Patito. I'm from Colombia, and my background is in software engineering, but around 4 years ago, I switched more into education, and we launched our project during the pandemic, which is ADASchool, where we basically help people start their careers as software developers in just 3 months and help them find their first job. So it's really exciting to see how this industry is growing, how there is a high demand for talent. So happy to speak with more people about what we're doing and how we can support you start your career.
Great. So would you describe that school as a boot camp?
Yeah, it's a boot camp, but I think we have two main differences, and one is that we design our programs based on the industry demand. So we measure success with employability, and that's where the journey ends. And we focus on teaching the technologies to have high demand on the market. And the second thing, which is I think ignored even for the universities, is what is known as soft skills, which from a study from Harvard and McKinsey, they have proven that 70% of your success when you're working on real companies comes from those skills and not from technical skills. And this is something that we developers need and will help us increase our chances to succeed in our career. So that's kind of the two main differences. And yeah.
Santiago, I'm so happy you mentioned these soft skills, because it is something full disclosure, I teach at university, and it's something I cannot emphasize enough among the students. Sometimes they have the idea they just need to be the rock star coder, but being able to talk, being able to collaborate, being able to work in teams is somewhat of a non-starter. It doesn't really matter how. Of course, we all want people who could code, but if you cannot work in a team, how are you going to work?
Definitely. I think that we as humans can achieve higher and better results if we work together. And if we don't know how to work with others, how to interact, how to communicate, how to be emphatic, then we won't be able to achieve the best results. So I think that's highly important. And I'm glad to know that you also are promoting those skills among your students.
Yeah, and that's great. And we always, I always like to appreciate how great this tech industry is, in that you have many different paths to get in. They have the self-taught, you have boot camps, you have a degree, and it really comes down to what's right for you. So I think we would go right into your talk now, and you would be talking about dependencies injection with Hilt, and we'll go into a bit of a Q&A afterwards.
Awesome.
All right, so let's get this up. Get that there. Right, let's go.
Everyone, my name is Santiago Capito from Colombia, and I'm going to talk to you today about dependencies injection with Hill. Before we dive into the topic, let's look at the agenda. We're going to cover today what dependencies injection is, why using dependencies injection, a practical example with a context and how we can use this to achieve different things, and finally, the steps how to use Hill to achieve dependencies injection with Android. So let's start. So first of all, what is dependencies injection? Dependencies injection is basically a design pattern that helps you do what is also known as inversion of control. So basically, you can switch the behavior of your application with very little effort, and this you're gonna see today how it works. There is a quote about dependency injection. It also means giving an object this instance variable, and really this is. So basically, you can instantiate objects and then use this object through the entire project and just make changes with only a few lines of code. Why using dependencies injection? Well, as you probably know, when you're writing software, you spend most of the time maintaining this project and evolving. When you have a decoupled architecture, this allows you to scale your application much faster and have something that you can switch behavior or you can change to different providers. And we're gonna see an example right after that, so let's see if this makes sense to you. So let's take a look at the example that I brought you in today. It's an analytics reporter, and let's see what the context of this situation is. Basically, you're a developer and you're asked to report different analytics events to different platforms, and this is because of a business decision. So basically, you need to find a way to make this change with less effort, and basically that you can add more analytics provider that could happen in the near future. So we have in this scenario Flurry, Mixpanel, and Google Analytics, but it can be anything. So the first thing we're gonna do is basically we define an interface. So we need to generalize the behavior. And as you probably know or worked with analytics before, you basically need two inputs. One is the name of the event that you're gonna report, and the second one is the data. So the data is just a dictionary or a map where you basically have the key and the value that you're going to store and represent this on the analytics platform. The second thing is to create a custom implementation of the interface. In this case, I just created one for Flurry Analytics example, and this is very simple. As you can see, just one line of code. Basically, there is an static method, Flurry agent block event, where I just pass the data, the name of the event, and the string map, which basically contains the details about these events, and this can be anything as you can tell. Once we have this, we can basically instantiate the object we want to use, and basically, and this is the beauty of dependencies injection, if you later on want to change to Google Analytics or to other provider, and as you're gonna see later on the practical example, it's just one line of code that you can basically here instantiate a different object that interacts with different analytics provider. But since we're returning our interface, then this will allow us to inject this component in different parts of our application, and we just have to change in one place. And this is the big advantage of using this design pattern. So in order to understand new technologies in general in Google, there are two ways that I suggest to you if you're starting or you're already a developer and want to learn new things from especially Android Jetpack that has a lot of features that will enhance and facilitate your process. I highly recommend you to look at the guides. So we're just gonna follow this one real quick. Basically, this is a guide that will give you the step-by-step that you can follow so you can actually use dependencies injection in your project. All right, so let's begin. In order to learn new concepts from Android documentation, there are two very useful resources. So the first one we're gonna follow today is the guide. The guides basically are step-by-step that will just guide you to achieve a result. In this case, using dependencies injection with Hill. So the first step, as probably you've done on other libraries, is basically add the dependencies we're gonna use. In this case, we're gonna add dependencies to both of the Gradle files. So one is in your project roots, and the one is inside the application folder. I'm just gonna go ahead and copy. I have here a new project created. Basically, just use the base activity template. I go ahead and open the field with Gradle. Then I select the first one, is the applications root, and I will add here below the JetBrains coupling Gradle plugin, my plugin for Dagger Hill. Then secondly, we need to use two plugins. Basically, Hill relies on annotations, so that's why we need to use what is known as KPP, which stands for Coupling Annotation Processor. So basically, we're going to add two more plugins here, one for Coupling Annotation Processor and the other one for Dagger Hill Android plugin. Because at the end, Dagger Hill will use annotations, so it means it will generate some code for you, and you just need to annotate the classes and the different entry points you want in order to achieve the dependencies injection. Then the next thing we need to add is the dependencies. So I'm just gonna go ahead at the end of this file and add here my dependencies. In this case, I suggest you follow the suggestions from the IDE and always use the latest version. Unless your code is already, or your application is already in the Play Store in production, then in that case, you have to be careful about upgrading to the latest version. Make sure migration doesn't affect the users. Here, I'm just gonna replace with a specific version, and then I'm gonna go ahead and sync my project. Now we have all the libraries we need in order to use Hill. The next thing, which is highly important, is Hill relies on Java 8 features. So you have to make sure that your compile options uses Java 1.8. If not, then you're gonna have issues when compiling your project. If you check that and that's okay, then you can go ahead and follow the next step. The next step is you need to have what is known as a Hill Android application. In this case, just gonna use the coupling part, and it's basically, we just need to create a custom class. So I'm gonna go ahead in the application package and create a new custom class, which will be called my application, and we can call it PI for dependencies injection application. And I select class. And then here, the first thing we need to do is we need to extend the application class from the Android library, and then call the constructor import, and then annotate this class with Hill Android application. Once you have this class annotated, then as you can see, it's in a light gray. This means it's not used under the project. So basically, we need to make the binding or the connection with this. Then I just copy the name, go to the manifest, and here under the application tag, I need to add here name, which will be connected to the application. And now we have defined our Dagger Hill application. Then the next thing we need to do is create our classes in order to be able to have our dependencies that we want to inject. So following the example of the presentation, we're just going to create a package that will be called analytics. And inside this analytics, the first thing we need to create is our interface. So the interface, we're just going to call analytics adapter. And this analytics adapter is just going to have one function, which will be able to report events. So we call it report, and then the report will take as parameters a string, which is the name of the event, and then the data, which is a map with value and key string and string, which is basically a very flexible structure, which will allow you to report to any file. Once we have the analytics adapter, we can create two versions of this, just in order to see how easy it is to change this in the project. But basically here, all you need to do is just, let's say here, we can have a Google Analytics adapter, and this class will basically have to implement the analytics adapter. Then it will ask you to implement the contract. And here we just, for the purpose of this collab, we're not going to connect or add any dependencies on Google Analytics. We're just going to simulate the behavior. Basically, we're just going to use the log, and we're going to log basically a message saying report event. Then we're going to use expression to replace the event name. And then finally with data, and then replace it here with the data. And we're going to create another adapter, which is in this case, the other possible implementation. Let's say one Flurry analytics adapter. And then the same thing, they should implement the analytics adapter. And again, we have to implement the function report. And we're just gonna go ahead, and here we're actually gonna just add a differentiator. So Google Analytics report event, and we're just gonna use the same thing here, but just change to Flurry Analytics. And of course, this is not a real behavior, but as you can imagine, all you need to do if you want to use this particular example or contextualize your application, all you need to do is just implement this function and add the real behavior you want. So analytics report, then we have already, or basically our module ready for injection. Then the next thing we need to do, so if we go to the guide, is that we have to define an entry point, which in the Android case will be the activities. So we go back to our main activity, and in the main activity, we're gonna go ahead and annotate our activity with Android entry point. And what this will allow us is to be able to inject our component inside this specific context. Then if we continue here, there are different things that you can use to inject in different parts, like the view model, which you probably want to do if you're using MDVM. And the next thing that we need to define is the hill models. So here, what we use is basically a Dagger model, and the Dagger models are very simple to define. So we just can create here a package, which we call VI. And inside, we're going to define our analytics model to be able to inject the component we just created. So the first thing you need to know, this is going to be an object. This is a static class. And we're just going to call it analytics module. And once we have this, we can just basically annotate this. Just going to zoom a little bit so you guys can see. Then this has to be annotated with add module, which is from Dagger. And then the other annotation that we need to use here is singleton, which is basically another design pattern. So basically, we want to have only one instance of each of these models. So basically, we have to say install in, and then use the singleton component. Basically, here we need to pass the class, and then this module is ready to be able to inject. Then the next thing we need to do is to define the function that will provide what we want to inject. In this case, we just have to say provide analytics adapter. And then in this case, this should return the interface. So we don't want to type anything to the specific module, but we want to be able to return any interface we want. So for instance, if we want to use the Google Analytics adapter, I will return here. This is not analytics module, but analytics adapter. And if I want to change my behavior, all I have to do is return a different instance. So let's say I want to change it to a Flurry Analytics adapter, and then this will inject in all places of the project. And this is the beauty of dependencies injection. You can basically change the behavior in just one line of code by instantiating different implementation. The last thing we need to do here is add two annotations. The first one is provide. So this is available for injection. The second one is singleton, because we want to make sure there is a single instance of this adapter on the project, because this will save you a lot of memory leaks and issues. And now this is ready for injection. So now we can go ahead and have this available anywhere in the project. All we have to do is first add the Android entry point, and then I can just go ahead and use inject. And then here we use let init bar, analytics adapter. Make sure you define it as the interface. And now here you have it available for basically anything you like. So here, just gonna test with the button. Here, we're just gonna put event. Then here, we're just gonna send null as data. And now let's see how this works. So in order to report null, we're just gonna create an empty map. Basically, because we have to change the interface. And now I have the project already running with the time constraints, but basically just gonna show you how this is just gonna work. So basically, once the project runs, we'll be able to see how the events are logged. So if I type here the developer, you can see here it reports events with the test data, and this object will be basically instantiated and available to use anywhere in the project. So that's basically it. This is the dependencies injection with Hill. As if you can see, if you have used Dagger before, it's a lot simpler. I highly recommend to use dependencies injection for instances. If you're using retrofit, you can define here your services and make sure you can inject all over your view models if you're using MVVM again. And then you have a very easy to maintain architecture, and you can actually achieve changes with very little effort. If you want to learn in more detail all the things you can do with Dagger Hill, I definitely recommend you the code lab. The code labs are the other part that I was telling you before that you can use to learn. Code labs are more detailed step-by-step guides that would walk you through a specific topic. In here, you can also see how you can actually inject this also on the interface using the add binds annotation and the add entry point, which you can use a lot more advanced things. But today we just covered the basics of Dagger Hill. So finally, I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that talk, Santiago. I'm really happy that I get to do this Q&A with you because I do teach a software engineering course, and I'm hearing these terms: dependency injection, design patterns, inversion of control. And I understand these are terms that may somewhat escape the early developer. So I'm wondering if we can break it down for our viewers and basically get class in session. So maybe we can start with dependency injection. Can you just give a brief description of what that is?
Sure. So dependencies injection is basically this comes from a framework known as Spring. It comes from the Java world, and it basically another way that you can find it on the internet is inversion of control, which I think maybe is easier to associate with that term. And it basically, like, you share instances with the project. You have like kind of a configuration part where you instantiate the objects that are common to different parts of your project. And dependencies injection allows you to do that with only one part of the code. So this will save you for having duplicated code, which would lead to problems in many cases. And then you can also, as I show in the talk, change the behavior, right? So if you have, like, this is also what you mentioned, like when you start, you don't wanna, like, you don't care much about design patterns or making software great, but once you get more into developing software, you think of ways of doing things more maintainable, which is something that I really look into the projects I work. And dependencies injection is one of the things which you can actually do also in if you're using iOS with Swift. And I think this is migrated to other technologies as well, because basically you define these common components that are used in different parts of the project, but you don't have to do instantiations everywhere, but you just kind of define it, and then with one annotation, you can kind of put those instances in place. And this is kind of, in a nutshell, what it is.
Yes. So if I can kind of bounce that back. So dependency injection and that concept of inversion of control, those are like the kind of established like techniques you would say that makes development easier for us as developers. So it kind of helps that developer experience. So like you said, when you apply that in version of control architecture, or more specifically dependency injection, you get to isolate where you would configure your application. So, and that makes it easier to change that configuration and allow it and set, where that configuration is actually applied across the app. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, and another advantage that is not mentioned there is when it comes to testing. So you're probably gonna use a library that is create mocks, and if you're using already dependencies injection, the best way to do it is through the constructors. And then what you're gonna do is you can switch, and now you can inject mocks, which are basically fake objects that you kind of pre-configure for your conditions that you want to meet. And this would create you like the perfect kind of setup to create high quality code. And that's what I really like, this design pattern and this technique.
That's so awesome. So do these things like design patterns and software engineering, these techniques, are they covered in that in your other school curriculum?
Definitely, yeah. We also like not only have like boot camps, but we also have like people that are already working in the field. And I have just want to share one story. This guy, he dreamed of becoming a software engineer. He had some basic knowledge, and he trained with us. And after 1 year, he got a job in one of the unicorns from Latin America, which is Mercado Libre, and his salary increased roughly like 2 times and 3 times in 1 year. So this kind of patterns and techniques will help you move from junior to semi-senior level, and we help people just upskill and develop their career faster, because I think this is also what I experienced in my own. I work with people which had a lot more experience than I had, and if you have this environment where that people is mentoring you, you can upskill much faster than if you do it on your own.
That's such an amazing story. Thank you for sharing with us. And I think that's something really special about what you're doing, because we have to be careful with boot camps. You'd see a lot of them out there just teaching. They probably won't even teach you programming. They might actually just teach you React. They try to get you to the quick wins. They're very minimalistic. But I'm so happy to hear that you're going the full 9 yards. You're covering things like software engineering. They're working with industry professionals. So that's really good to hear. So I mentioned earlier before that you are a GDE, but we should probably explain that for our audience. That stands for the Google Developer Expert Program, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you give us a breakdown? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So basically, Google Developer Expert are people like myself that are very passionate about sharing knowledge. You have to prove its experience of at least 2 or 3 years sharing knowledge with community. So I'm the founder of the largest Android community in my country, which is the Android Meetup Bogota. We have now 2,800 members. And from that, like efforts of many years of contributing, Google gave us a recognition, and they basically supported us. Well, before the pandemic, we were allowed to travel, and I wish we had this live somewhere in the Caribbean, but maybe next year. But basically, they sponsor you with tickets and exchange of your knowledge and promoting technologies, and also being like an active promoter of their technologies, sharing knowledge, basically.
Yeah, that is so great. The whole I really like I'm really happy to have GDEs. I think we have another GDE speaker, and so you mentioned that y'all are the largest Android community.
Yeah, at least in Colombia.
In Colombia, oh wow, that's a really amazing. So in terms of becoming a GDE, you have to have. I'm seeing, like, I've talked with different GDEs, and I've seen they have different parts. I'm seeing, like, with you have a community there. I'm seeing some GDEs do a lot of mentorship. Some GDEs make a lot of content. I'm curious. I know you're in the mentorship and the community space, but do you do some content creation stuff as well?
Not as much as I like. we're actually starting to do it in our school. We want to make some of our programs available. For now, it's in Spanish, but we want to put it also in English and make some of the programs free so people can see the way we teach our methodology. I have written some articles, but yeah, I haven't done much content, and we have a few videos on our YouTube channel, but mostly they're in Spanish. So yeah, I'm not much of a content creator, and what you mentioned is also good to add. Basically, there are some GDs that are awarded because they are content creators. There are some others that are just speaking at conferences. That's what I have done mostly because I really like interacting with people. I like sharing my experiences, but also learning from other cultures. When before the pandemic, I had the chance to travel through all Latin America. Now I work with people in Bolivia, people also in Argentina, Chile, in Ecuador, so other countries. I think the Latin community is stepping up real quickly. You can see a lot of unicorns. The startup scene is growing a lot faster, and I think it's also thanks to the developer communities that are spreading knowledge across the region.
Yeah, that is so great to hear. I could see. I mean, we are the first Caribbean here, but we are officially under the LATAM region, right? So we do interact with the GDEs and GDGs in Latin America, and sometimes we do collaborate with events. And you know, there's something I always see. They're always very enthusiastic. They're very warm and welcoming. And you know, we're just so honored to be part of that. You know, the LATAM region. It's very fun given that the level of diversity and you know their language barriers. So we have some in Spanish, we have Portuguese speakers, but even despite the barriers, we're able to come together and do such great things. So Santiago, I really want to thank you for being part of our DevFest and ending off the session today. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
Thank you, Nicholas. Just happy to be part of your community. I think the language barrier, we can break it together with our efforts, and I'm happy to also, just find us on our social media on ADA. Basically, if you want to contact us for anything, and I think like developer world is changing. You don't need a degree. You can start your career soon, and I think there is enough market demand for jobs and changing your careers. If that's what you want to do, there is plenty of opportunities.
I agree. Thank you so much, Santiago. And we will see you in the next one.
All right. Thank you, Nicholas. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. So that brings us to an end of today's sessions, but that's not the last of DevFest Caribbean 2021. As a matter of fact, we'll be back again live tomorrow, 9 a.m. I should give you the time zone. That's GMT minus 400. So 9 a.m. Trinidadian time. And with many, many more speakers, many more talks. It's going to be very exciting. You can RSVP and get stream access on the ticker below at bit.ly DF Carib 2021. You can see the full agenda of our speakers. There will be probably two stream links. We'll have the morning session and the after session. So thanks again for joining me for DevFest Caribbean today on the beginning of the weekend track, and I will see you all tomorrow.